On March 27, 2025, Adel Sambrano Ramos was sentenced to death in Sacramento, California. But to understand how this case ended in a capital verdict, we need to go back to the events that led up to it. Specifically, a call for help in the summer of 2019 and the ambush that followed. It started the night before, June 18, 2019. Megan Jansa was driving on the freeway with Adel in the passenger seat when the arguing began. At one point, Megan said she could crash the car and end it all, but Adel didn't flinch. "Let's end it right now," he said, then grabbed the steering wheel, trying to run the car off the road. And later that night, things got worse. Back at home, Adel's behavior deteriorated as he faced the prospect of Megan leaving him. Megan told police he stormed into the backyard, came back with a shovel, and slammed it onto the kitchen table. "It's to bury you after I kill you," he told her. Then he pulled a gun from under his pillow, tucked it into his waistband, and retrieved an axe and a homemade pipe bomb. The threats were direct, and he told Megan that if she called for help, that lead would fly. By the next day, June 19th, Megan had escaped and called the police around 5:40 p.m. She asked officers to escort her back to the house on Redwood Avenue to collect her things. And to them, it sounded like a routine domestic call. But what waited for them wasn't routine. It was an ambush. When officers got to the property, Megan explained she needed to collect some belongings from a detached garage out back. They all first tried to access the main house, but it was sealed from the inside, so with no way in, they left it alone. 5 officers, including Officer Tara O'Sullivan, a 26-year-old rookie officer, came up with a plan. They'd check the garage first, make sure it was safe, then let the woman go in to grab her things. By then, the officers thought the property was empty, since Adel wasn't responding to their calls. But what happened next was captured on body cam, and everything changed in an instant.
"Hey, Adel Police Department. Adel Police Department, you're not under arrest, you're not in trouble."
Apparently, Adel had been hiding inside the house, waiting, and then he opened fire. Tara was hit almost immediately.
Officer down, code 3 fire. High-powered rifle."
The windows were blacked out, the doors were barricaded, and through the walls, officers later found what they called murder holes, carefully carved openings that let him fire without exposing himself. He fired off and on for hours, and every time officers tried to get close to Tara, more bullets came. They couldn't reach her. They couldn't pull her to safety. The situation was complete chaos, and they weren't able to handle it on their own. It took until 6:54 until the SWAT teams rolled in with tactical gear, shields, and armored trucks. All this time, Tara lay on the ground, seriously injured, but no one was able to help her until the armored truck arrived. Tara was rushed to the hospital, but sadly, it was too late. She died of her injuries before the standoff was even over. However, back at the house, the chaos wasn't over just yet. A police helicopter hovered overhead, and officers radioed updates in short, tense bursts. One said they'd taken a round to their vehicle, while another warned of rapid fire from inside. At one point, someone even spotted a laser, but this appeared to be from the police themselves. They still weren't able to get contact with Adel, and the situation remained tense. The standoff dragged on, and shots were still fired from inside the house for hours on end. By 11 p.m., Adel was shouting from inside the house, still agitated and unpredictable, and he threw a cell phone out the door as a sign that he finally wanted to negotiate. The officers stayed behind cover with their weapons ready, and the instructions were clear for everyone. If he stepped out with a weapon, they were allowed to act. But if he came out unarmed, they were to take him in alive. Using a robot, police sent the phone back into the house, hoping to reopen the line of communication. This was their chance to talk him down. But Adel had no intention of giving up so easily. When he finally picked up, his voice was sharp, erratic. He told negotiators he had a gun to his own head and that he would only surrender to one specific officer. It wasn't until after 1:50 a.m. that he finally walked out the back door with the phone in one hand and a shirt in the other. He was taken into custody just before 2 a.m., 8 hours after fatally shooting Tara O'Sullivan. She had been shot while doing her job and left lying there for nearly an hour as bullets flew overhead. The shooting marked Sacramento's first line-of-duty death in more than 20 years, and it shattered the department. The grief was immediate, and it ran deep. Adel Ramos was already known to have a violent past, and he also had a long history with drugs, especially meth. The signs had been there for years, clear to anyone who looked close enough. But behind the headlines, who was he really? Born in 1974 in the Philippines, Adel's life started hard. He never made it past the 9th grade, and by his early teens, he was already working, trying to survive. Later, he managed to bring his brothers to the U.S., hoping to protect them from an abusive uncle back home. In California, Adel managed to find stability. He started off flipping burgers at McDonald's, but through hard work and time, he built a 17-year career as a carpenter in the construction world. His former bosses described him as skilled, dependable, and hardworking. But that life began to unravel after a workplace injury. Suddenly, Adel couldn't do the job the way he used to, and when the paychecks stopped coming, he turned to survival by other means, selling marijuana and building firearms to support himself, his wife, and their 2 children. Behind the image of a hard-working provider, though, a much darker pattern had been building, one defined by violence, especially toward women. Court records revealed years of abuse, threats, rage, and outbursts that had turned the family home into a battleground. In both 2004 and 2007, his wife filed for protection, and a judge approved domestic violence restraining orders against him. Each time, Adel was ordered to surrender his firearms, but over time, the protection orders expired and the weapons returned. At one point, he even told his wife he would blow my family with a bomb. This was the last straw for her, and she divorced him. But she wasn't the only one who saw the warning signs. Neighbors had long noticed Adel's disturbing behavior. He had a pattern of harassment and intimidation, especially toward the African-American family next door. Witnesses said he regularly shouted racial slurs, and one day he even chased their 3 children with kitchen knives while they played outside. His violence escalated. Just months before the deadly shooting, in September 2018, Adel was charged with battering a female juvenile right inside the Redwood Avenue home where the standoff would later unfold. By then, Adel had turned his home into a fortress. He installed live surveillance feeds, giving him a view of every corner of his property. Inside, police would later find a stockpile of firearms and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. Some of the weapons had been illegally modified to fire faster and hold more rounds. It was clear he had been preparing for this day. In 2021, a judge ruled that Adel would stand trial for capital murder and attempted murder, and in August 2023, he pleaded guilty. The trial then moved into the penalty phase, where a jury would decide whether he should spend the rest of his life in prison or be sentenced to death. There, the prosecutors didn't hold back. They played the body cam footage from the night Tara was killed. Jurors heard her voice. They listened to her breathing, struggling in her final moments. They also heard Adel ranting from inside the house, angry, incoherent, and paranoid. Lead prosecutor Jeffrey Hightower told the jury, "Stand up for Tara," as he had personally asked to try the case. The defense didn't try to deny what happened. They admitted Adel was responsible, but they still asked for mercy. His lawyer said Adel grew up in a violent home in the Philippines. That at 5 years old, he watched his father bleed to death and even used his own hands to try and stop the bleeding. That he had untreated mental illness and a long addiction to meth. The defense pleaded with them to weigh his past against the crime, to see the man behind the moment, and they pleaded for life in prison. In November 2024, the first jury couldn't decide. They were split between death and life in prison, and the case ended in a deadlock. But when a second jury took over, the outcome changed quickly. Just 2 days after closing arguments, on March 27, 2025, Adel Sambrano Ramos was sentenced to death. Tara's mother, Kelly, sat in the front row when the verdict was read. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She clutched a pair of handcuffs in her hands, and when it was over, she quietly hugged the prosecutor and his team, a gesture that said everything words couldn't. Outside the courtroom, Kelly sat with officers, many of them her daughter's friends, all of them shaped by what happened. They didn't talk much, and the silence said enough. That day, Adel joined nearly 600 others on California's death row. The state hasn't carried out an execution since 2006, but the law still allows juries to choose it, and this jury did. Adel Sambrano Ramos was 51 years old when he was sentenced to die. As of now, no execution date has been scheduled. In California, death sentences often mean decades of waiting. On average, inmates spend 18 to 22 years on death row before an execution is even possible. Many never reach that point. They die of natural causes or have their sentences reduced through lengthy appeals. But for now, Adel's name sits on that list, one of hundreds, with a sentence but no timeline, and a verdict that still echoes through the lives he tore apart.